Hi, my name is Marissa Ruiz, and I'm responding to Iman's argument that the world is not a clash of civilizations. She made a lot of good points, I think, that have made me reconsider my stance, but I'll give this my best go. To begin, I want to address her claim that saying society ought to be a contest implies that society is solid. I agree with her that Huntington overlooks this fact for the sake of his argument. Society is far from solid and cannot be defined to just a single region, but it's the very dispersion of cultures in the world that lead to internal conflict. This is why there are fault lines, as Huntington addresses, and why Western civilizations understand the importance of incorporating religious freedom into their core mandates, like your right to practice a religion in the U.S. This is also why, however, I think Huntington should have incorporated inter-civilizational conflict into his theory rather than just stopping at between civilizations. Our cultural differences run deep and have the power to fragment populations. Just look at Catalonia. They have their own language and traditions and a population of 7.5 million, and it's one of Spain's wealthiest regions, making up almost 19% of their GDP. Their fight for independence from Spain has become violent and full of protests, which has resulted in warnings that this issue is damaging Spain's democratic credentials. This is why cultural characteristics of the individual are much more definitive than political ideologies of the nation, which is Huntington's main point. Governments can negate their people's cultures, and that'll often lead to conflict. Just because civilization is hard to categorize doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't the root cause of these conflicts, both in and out of the state. While one could argue that power is a driving cause of these wars, I like to maintain that feeling that your core beliefs and identity being neglected in policies that ultimately govern your life is the ultimate cause of unrest. Another point that Iman makes is that illustrations of Muslims in Huntington's theory is inaccurate, most likely because he made the bold assumption that our cultures are solid and unchanging, which is not true. I'd agree that our cultural norms and our values do not have a home address, as Iman puts it. And although he implies that Islam is the greatest enemy to Western civilization, that thought rests in stereotypes and a lack of information. Muslim culture cannot be summarized with just one type of practice by any means. However, with the Western tendency to universalize its ideals, it would make sense for high rates of conflict to arise between the two regions. It's true that Huntington's constant portrayal of Islamic society in a hostile, such negative manner doesn't seem very objective. I'd agree with Iman on that. But I think the reason he's so critical of Islamic society is because it most easily exemplifies his theory. The cultures here are historically very committed to their own religion rather than to their own state, and ideologies like liberalism would have no place here. When he wrote this, of course, which is what made it perfect for his argument. And I would agree that this is where his argument does fall a bit short, though. A lot of his assumptions are rested in the wrong kind of place, but I don't think that should invalidate his entire argument. At the same time, I think part of the reason he holds Western society in such a special light is because they incorporate fault lines into their government. Critics of Huntington's theory hold that it is not accurate to portray Western society as the focus of the world, and I agree, but it does make sense for his argument to do so. Today, even with structural variations, every Western country is defined by an elected political system and a constitution that guarantees personal, political, and religious freedom. I don't think this makes it better than any other civilization, but if our world truly were a class of civilizations, then this would be the ideal type of government to protect our individual rights. Iman also uses the example of the rise of China to show that another society with another ideology can be just as powerful as the West, and I think that brings up a really good point of relative gain. Huntington would argue that China's rise to power would threaten the U.S.'s power. And his theory explains why the U.S. would view China as a threat in the first place, which is also why Russia's growing cooperation with China is a perfect example of keeping your enemies close. And this proves that civilizations will do what it takes to serve their own self-interests. War may not always be the result. I think the clash is a bit, the clash of civilizations is a bit broad, but that doesn't mean there isn't clashing happening. Clash can occur politely behind closed doors and strategic alliances and long drawn out debates, but the root cause, I think, can always be traced back to cultural differences first and foremost.